Dev Cafe right now on Twitch can see us. I am watching the chat, so if there's any technical difficulties, just let me know. That's how this game goes sometimes. I will welcome you first. My name is Karina. As you probably already know, you're watching the GameDev Cafe. Today we have a very cool Get to Know GameDev live. I would say that this is one that I probably personally went after a little bit more because I'm a big fan of Kid Koala's music. But as you may or may not have heard, he's involved in making a game with some really cool members of the GameDev community, and the game is called Floor Kids. So I'm very excited today to have both Eric and also John with us. So thanks, guys, so much for joining. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Picture's okay.
You're great. Yeah, you look great.
Beautiful. Awesome.
All right.
So again, thanks for making the time to join us. I know Floor Kids is sort of just in its I guess, sort of snowball phase of PR and press and development and everything else. So it's a busy time, but I'm really glad that, I guess, for two things, that this game exists because it's extremely unique, and that we're able to talk to you guys today because, as I mentioned before we got on this sort of live stream, you're sort of less traditional game developers, I think, than maybe some others who we've talked to. So with that, if you guys want to start maybe just by introducing yourselves, I guess obviously I'd love to know what your role is sort of in terms of the games industry, but also if that's sort of your day job or your side hustle, how that kind of fits into you as a professional as well.
All right, John, I'll let you start.
You go first, man.
All right. My name's Eric, also known as Kid Koala. I am primarily a recording and touring artist, music artist, and let me see. I've done some work for games in the past, but this was the first, full-time project. At one point, it became very full-time, especially near crunch time before launch. So, yeah, that's that. This is the first, kind of my first foray into scoring an entire video game. Before that, I had licensed some tracks to other game companies and whatnot. But this is the first time, starting from scratch from the boards on.
It's all on you this time.
Well, just the music. I just did the music and the sound design. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And how about you, John? What's your sort of responsibility for this project?
Yeah. On the animator and did the art direction, and I guess you could say I created the concept of Floor Kids.
Oh, cool.
Back when I had just met Eric, and so Eric is, basically from the day I started creating the Floor Kids characters, and basically Eric saw it the next day, and he was really on board with it.
Ah,
And
cool.
Yeah, he showed me a stack of paper. I remember a stack of papers because he used to draw actually on paper, and he had one of the characters doing a windmill or a six-step. I don't remember what it was, but we were flipping through. This is amazing that he was able to break down all the movements and do all the rotations and all the torque and how gravity works. It's because John's a b-boy himself and knows those moves that I think he's able to animate them so well,
Mm-hmm. That
Well,
definitely stands out.
yeah, I think that I guess you could say I got into b-boying, but I didn't start that way. As I think animation actually led me into it a lot easier because animation is so rhythmic and it's about posing, poses and pose to pose, and it's visual. I think that's why I gravitated towards animation.
Mm-hmm.
Fascination with movement and breaking is all of that together, and it has a lot of character and stage presence.
That's true.
But so yeah, my animation history is I started, on paper, animating with light tape, on light table, and learning what was at the time I guess, the last little bit of the industry doing traditional animation, and I think I went into school right the exact year where they were like canceling that. You know, hey,
Throw out the textbook.
Other things called
all mocap from now on.
Get out your Wacom. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. But traditional definitely at the schools, it's got all of these different artists studying traditional, like painters, watercolor, people who have tons of different talents. They would, and so it's a very it's a really like great environment to just find your style and stuff like that. So I think through the years I was doing traditional animated films.
Okay.
Over the time, I started having a couple different styles, and so the style of Floor Kids is under JonJon or JonJon Animation now. So like, there's other styles that can kind of live on their own, and we don't have to talk about those. So.
Ah, okay, interesting. So you've got sort of a brand that has a couple different facets, and this is just one of them. Is kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, I guess you could call them brands.
Oh, that might be a 4-letter word. I don't know.
It's interesting, yeah.
Very marketing of them.
Oh dear, can you tell what my background is? I know it's shameless.
No. I think what gravitated me towards John's work. We actually met at the National Film Board here in Montreal. I was
nice.
working
Okay.
for a mutual friend, Lillian Chan, animator Lillian Chan. I was working on a film, and I was contributing a little bit to the score there, and they were sharing a studio. And Lillian said, "You got to check out John's work." At the time, he was making this film called Asthma Tech. I don't know if people can find that online through the NFB or something. But yeah, I mean, essentially, it was a story, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, John, about it's a thinly veiled autobiography of a kid who had asthma, but then uses his superpowers as an artist to create this, wonderful universe that he could escape to, and then even his friends at his school, he was able to kind of create superhero alter egos through the power of his drawing skills.
Oh, cool.
It was a real charming, hilarious, beautiful film that he was working on, and so that's when we met. But even then, those characters really, resonated with me. Just the style in terms of them being very raw and sketchy, even in the way that he would animate. There's a very tactile feel to it. He would leave the extra sketchy pencil marks or eraser smudges. All that stuff was kind of in there a bit. And when I saw him do the Floor Kid stuff, I mean, for lack of a better word, if I were to speak in like musical terms, it just felt very analog. What he was doing, and
Gotcha.
And I think that there was a kinship there immediately. I mean, I could never dance. I do have a little bit of an animation background, but I never pursued it. But I made a few claymation things in high school or what have you. But
you draw, and
I draw also. But I think the main thing is like our connection here was that we like this kind of tactile, hand done, sort of self-imposed slave labor kind of craft.
You're both masochists, yeah.
My friends like, this dude makes films by like drawing one frame after one frame on an actual sheet of paper and flipping it back and forth with his other hand to try to see if the movement's right. And then meanwhile, I'm trying to make albums out of tiny slivers of audio that I find and kind of Frankenstein together. So there's definitely a bit of obsessive like
you guys have a common bond there.
I really like the menial task.
So you reminisce about.
I think about scratching is like to learn how to scratch. You pretty much like use this much of the record and you try to like cut it up in 10,000 ways. and you'll spend, most of your childhood or, high school years or college years trying to master how to do that, kind of, and so in that way, I think there was already a kinship, and then obviously, through him being like in the b-boy scene and me just being in the music and the scratch scene. I could never dance, that's why I ended up DJs. But I have plenty of friends who break, and so I understand that culture. It's the same thing,
Totally.
You see, and then you just work at it, and it inspires you first, even if you're an outsider, and eventually it just comes to be like that becomes a vehicle for you to find your voice in a way. I think that's what's great about that scene in general. You know what I mean? And so it was really about, who put their time in, and if you were able to get to a level of fluency where you could kind of have your own style, so to speak. So I think just on a core level, we had similar upbringings and sort of, obviously the connection through that music and through the break scene and scratching and stuff. I think that's very clear. So when it came time to talk about collaborating on something, Lure Kids really,
that made a lot of sense. I mean, it is sort of it is taking it, at least in my view, to a much riskier level. I mean, making a movie is one thing, and an animated sequence, you have a lot of control over the experience. But a game is a whole other, can of worms. Did you guys know initially that Floor Kids was going to be a game experience? Was that always the plan from the get-go?
No, I'll let John answer this one. But.
And I think what you just described of like game is very high risk, and you don't know what the experience is going to be like. I think we learned that the hard way.
Oh no.
We didn't start going to coding school or anything.
Right.
But I think the hard way. So.
And I will speak to this in terms of like meeting game devs. Like you said, we're a bit outside that scene. But I kind of did this cold call into the ether. I just reached out on socials and said, hey, if there are any indie dev crews in Montreal that want to talk, I just want to see what's up, what's possible. Nice. Just trying to meet some people in that scene, and that's what it was. That's what started it, a group of people kind of responded, and we all went and grabbed some food, and we're just sort of like brainstorming ideas. And then of that first meeting, we did meet Philip Roasting.
Oh, nice.
And so Mike and Paul with HoloLabs. So that's from that very first meeting, they were the ones who kind of looked at some of the ideas were bouncing around, and Mike, especially when he saw Floor Kids, was very, very interested in the possibilities there in terms of, here's this insane amount of animation, over 10,000 frames per character. Like, how do we build an engine that you can control through a game controller to make this character dance, that would have that good feeling. And I think for him it was a challenge, and I think speak to that especially the indie dev crews that I've met. What excited me about the scene was that they had this kind of new technology available to them, whether it was Unity or the ability to create using something that they didn't have to have a huge studio of, hundreds of coders. It could be a small crew just working super overdone, trying to make something that they were into happen, bring the dream into the reality, so to speak. And it reminded me of I don't know, like the first time I got like a 4-track cassette recorder or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden it's like, what? You don't understand. With this, we can layer stuff. We can make
The
the universe.
possibilities. Yeah.
Or and essentially he explained it to me like that. It's like, yeah, it's almost like what used to be technology that could only be afforded by big companies is that you could have your home version of almost like Pro Tools or something in musical terms, where
Yeah.
you create and something to a very professional level without being part of the studio system or something. And so I really like that ethos, like that the vibe was very gung ho. Let's try do this. Let's do something that's never been done before, and so they were up for that. And I think at that point I introduced them to Rena Thompson, who's my manager, who's sort of project manager on Floor Kids, and also Jonathan, and we just talked about what was possible. Yeah.
Very cool. And I guess, I mean, that was probably an early stage of the project, but did you understand the type of game that you were making at that time? Like that it was going to be a, battle, rhythm-based, sort of motion/rhythm-based battler? Like, was that concept sort of clear from the beginning, or is that something that had to evolve?
Well, I'm gonna maybe like speak just a little bit before all what Eric mentioned. It's because you were talking a bit about like film and how did you decide? Did you know it was going to be a game?
Yeah,
So
like how did it sort of come? Because obviously, in its final stage, it's like a very like clear concept, as you said. Like it kind of like translates very well. It's everyone kind of wants to play it, but this is a long time coming, right?
yeah. So I think that the part of the way to frame it is sort of you look for these avenues and pathways for like me and Eric are artists and trying to live off of art as a side hustle to the point where it becomes our main hustle or whatever. So you try to find ways to just make it work any way you can. And I think Floor Kids was just a 4-minute short clip or a film or whatever label category you want to put it, but it was purely just exploring two characters and how they could dance the same type of dance, but have a completely different personality and style, and kind of show these different philosophies that actually exist, sub philosophies in b-boy. It's like almost so specific that you could kind of look at it and realize it's fun, it's charming, but maybe you don't know what's going on. But what we did was we posted the video to B-Boy World, and all the like famous cats were like, "Who is this guy? How did he like that? That's nuts," or whatever. So it was like kind of from I don't know, business level or artistic survival level. You make something without anyone kind of having a financial stake in it or whatever, and then people see it afterwards, and then they're like, now what can we do with this? Because there's something there that I feel is attractive. And I think that's the point we were at after we made this little animation short. And nobody, I've made tons of short films, and they're really a special medium, but they don't do anything really. Like everyone's trying to do stuff with them, but I think what they serve is they kind of have this like, here's what the vibe is, here's what the vision is, and then where can it go from there. And I think we tried a lot of different stuff, and it was more like it's not that we couldn't do those things, it's that the deals or the vibes didn't feel right up until when Eric shouted out and said, let's make a game. And I'm not gonna front, I'm gonna be like, well, I've never worked in games. First of all, I know friends who work in games. I know that it's a very it's a thing. If you're in animation and you step into that other world, like you can't go in there thinking you know what you know, because it's a whole
Mm,
thing. And
I
it's the
see.
same from animation into comics or graphic novels. It's like it's not the same, and your skills may translate, but it's like you're stepping into someone else's turf. And
Mhm.
I knew I was not that person necessarily to lead the way, but Eric found those guys, our partners now, and basically through that process, because it's sort of like them looking at this breakdance film where what are they doing? What is this? I don't get it, but I get it's cute, that kind of thing. It's like it was a whole experimental process, because the game development process for Floor Kids is pretty straight up experimental. Like, we tried
Mm.
stuff. Does it feel right? Oh, that's fun. And then it gets removed in order to pursue another direction. Oh, well, that's actually fun too. And then
Mhm.
this and that and this and that. There's so many ways to go about it. So we tried tons of stuff, and we developed lots of little mini games. And yeah, it was a very it was a bit like we built this crew, and everyone had different skills and experiences, and then let's see what we could do with it. And this
Cool.
is what we made. Uh,
The fruit of the labor. That's cool. I mean, it's neat that there were so many other things along the way. I mean, spin-off items, or I don't know, future bonus items for fans, or whatever you want to call it. I'm curious how much of the game as it exists today, and I assume you guys are very happy with it since it sort of came out of like an experimental process. How much of the game as you see it today is something that you would have ever imagined you guys being involved in? Like, is this something that you would have expected, maybe not when you're a kid, but like even in your early phases of your career, would you have ever thought that you'd have your name on a rhythm breakdance battle video game?
No, not at all. I mean, we have arcade consoles for Floor Kids in our headquarters over here, and we were just, yeah, trip to just see that. And I remember, this is gonna date me, but I remember going to like Johnny Z's in Vancouver or something with my little, pocket full of quarters and try to make that last 4 hours of my good.
This is my whole afternoon. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think games were always a part of life, I guess, growing up in
Mhm.
that era and with the friends I had. I actually personally, my parents wouldn't let us have an NES or any kind of console.
Oh.
So I would literally be playing actual arcade consoles at the arcade
Mhm.
or at friends' houses and stuff like that. But those were great times. Just
Mhm.
I remember that. So I mean, from a bit of a nostalgic way, I think it's yeah, absolutely a bit of a dream come true there in terms of how this game engine works. It's way more complex than Galaga. I mean, that game. I'm much better at Galaga than I am at Floor Kids because left, right, and shoot. And if you knew
Sorted.
to get the tractor beam and you get your other chip, you can have like a double ship, and it kind of helps you get through certain things faster. But um, yeah, but I'm starting to realize, it's a new era, and there's these controllers that have 8 buttons, and even the joystick can click as a button, and all these things that you can do that it wasn't possible in the 80s,
It's true.
and so that's why, yeah, we often, it was the developers and the game programmers and designers, in the Hollow Labs and Phil and those guys sort of educating us on things like scoring systems and
Mhm.
you know uh, how we could bring what we've built or drawn and scored into a place that could be something that would give some freedom of expression, but also some sort of in-game goals, also for ways that people could learn how to master
Mhm.
uh, each of these characters, like a la Street Fighter or something,
Mm-hmm.
where the deep combos that I'm still not really able to do any of the combos. I just I imagine I'm gonna have to write down, the actual sequence of controls and then
That's
read it. Well,
allowed. I had a cheat sheet
yeah,
growing up.
but I mean, I think
But I
that
guess
has better. Suited,
no, but you make a
you
good point. Like that's sort of part of what makes a game fun is you can have a core concept that's cool, but without
yeah,
those design elements that as you say, sort of someone who's made a game before would understand how to trigger that um, fandom in someone playing and make them want to
yeah,
get better at the game, right?
yeah.
Is it? Would you guys, for either of you, would you say that the game is modeled after games that you've played before? Like, is this like you mentioned Street Fighter? So I'm just wondering if intentionally or otherwise, this is sort of a game that feels like other games that you guys are used to playing, or did you guys set out to try and make it sort of something different?
We we played a lot. Like when we started the development process, it was like an open canvas.
Mm.
We knew that because we're being categorized as a rhythm game, which is yeah, that's what we did. But it's sort of like we started this from the theme, from the subculture of breaking and hip hop, which is rhythmic. Like
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't make a game about those things if you're gonna move a rhythm. That just makes
You
no
can
sense.
ignore the fact that there's a beat somewhere.
It's kind of natural, yeah.
But if
Yeah,
you're getting
Yeah.
onto the battle, if you're getting on the dance floor and you're just doing stuff and you're not paying attention to the rhythm, what are you doing?
That's a good point.
It's just so we knew we had to go get all of the games and play all the games that had rhythm. We went and we checked. I had played B-Boy for PS2.
Hmm. Hmm.
Played that, and that one actually doesn't have a lot of rhythm in it. It's like linking moves and it has all these other aspects true to the culture. But I think one of the things that some b-boys have been telling us is that they love that rhythm is so strong in Floor Kids.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we played Parappa the Rapper. We played what was it, Beat Sneak Bandit on mobile.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like that one, and played all these games. Like me, my history is like did not I did not continue in games. I was sort of like Eric. Like I got the Nintendo after Super Nintendo had already come out, and I guess we were getting stuff secondhand. And then I got Super Nintendo way after it was a good thing. And then N64 was my last sort of, and I had Game Boy as well. So I had those
Hmm.
ones, and then at some point it just started going in this really really very very immersive and GoldenEye, for
Yeah.
instance, pretty much all the first person shooters come from. If GoldenEye had not happened, then who
Yeah, it
knows,
exploded from there. It's true.
right? So, but that wasn't my thing, and I got into art,
Hmm.
and that was my kind of game. It's like
Cool.
making art and stuff, and so. But I think living in Montreal is like when indie games kind of blew up or started to bubble out, like because in Montreal it's there's the big huge studios and then the little indie scene kind of started coming,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
started seeing these games that were really really creative and kind of they were additive but they were explorative, like you could figure it out as you go, and that really kind of caught my attention,
Hmm.
but not to the point where I could just delve into it. And so I think we had a lot of those discussions too. We looked at Journey, we looked at
Nice.
things that didn't have a clear uh, goal set out to the player, like communicated. And
Hmm.
so I think some of that really inspired some of us, and for others, they wanted to really keep it very like in the traditional format. And I think we went somewhere in the middle, and I think that was a good decision. I mean, like
Nice.
we basically, yeah, we looked at rhythm games. We even designed a pure rhythm game for Floor Kids, which
Oh, cool.
is not really released. I guess I don't know. It's something that we developed, and But I think that for me, I wanted one of my modes. I wanted it to be just pure expression, like pure test out this animation system, see what you could do, see what you like to do, see what you can do back and forth, see what you can, you know. And for some people, that was too out there.
But I mean, some people like made the connection, even if it was a subliminal part about it, sort of feeling like Tony Hawk meeting a rhythm game kind of style. And I remember just being on the tour bus and everyone just running that Tony Hawk game, you know, in the back lounge of the tour bus. Just, after the gig, you're back there trying to master these things, you know. And but yeah, in a way, it was a kind of a game where you could explore, you could master it, but at the same time, you had the freedom to kind of draw your lines and figure out your combos and routines as you wish, you know. And so that, I think, within the current state of the game, there's these freestyle rounds during the verses, and then in the choruses there are these more target rhythm, a mini rhythm game in the choruses. But during the verses, it's actually where it's kind of open to the player to try to rack up, you know, points by doing crazy combos or adding flash or adding pauses and reversals and switches and strobes and all these kinds of hidden things that we put in there that we don't say you have to do, but if you start integrating them, it will affect your score, and it will actually make you a more interesting dancer to watch on the screen, even from that aspect. I mean,
nice.
You know, John's been to plenty of B-boy battles. I've DJed plenty of those events, and it's true. Like sometimes I'll be playing, and then, you know, a kid might jump in for 16 bars and just do power moves the whole time. And in some ways, you're kind of like, that's cool, like, congratulations. But then in other ways, you're kind of like, wow, there is more dynamics to it in a way. If you're able to come out of a freeze right into a power move and then into some top rock and back and weave it in and out. And then if you could do that fluidly, I mean, that's real mastery of something, not just one component of it. And I think that, you know, the way John started creating the animation for each character was to have like all those categories, but all those different styles represented, from top rock, floor work to
here's what, like, when you talk about Street Fighter and fighting games, here's sort of where it's different animation system point of view. So like in a fighting game, there's always an idle position, which is your default. You come back to it,
right?
And then from the idle, you can punch or jump or kick or whatever your super moves. So, you know, in the art form for breaking, it's like you never go back to the same move. You should never really. There's never an idle. An idle is sort of, in our game, is a fail or a fall state.
Cool. Okay.
So wherever you are in the animation system, you're gonna want to be able to link up to any other moves as you choose to. So that's why the animation system is very vast. It's
cool.
And it's very vast, not only because from move to move there needs pathways and links and custom transitions, or if they are lacking because there's not enough time to do so, then they will go by proxy to a move that they're both connected to. So
cool. Okay.
Move.
That's why it always looks so fluid, I guess, because that's the weirdest thing about this game, is like if somebody messes up, in most games it's jarring. It's like a jarring moment, but this game sort of keeps going. Your points don't keep going, but like the dance keeps going, the music keeps going.
So you totally eat it.
That's why I like it better than real breakdancing.
That's probably the only move where we didn't have a transition. It's kind of like, if you don't input anything,
there's no super fail. It's a very friendly game that way, yes.
Yeah.
Somebody actually sent me an Instagram of a guy about to do like a move, and then he like slams on his face. And I was like, oh! And he was like, what? I was like, no, not in real life, please. But
I was gonna say, was there any mocap done in this game? Is that why there's no falls and face plants and
I like
brutal injuries?
Yeah.
I mocapped through my DNA.
Actually, yeah,
My mother.
that's a big part of this though, is knowing, not just observing as like an animator and an artist, but knowing these moves. I think from your body and muscle memory must have been a huge advantage, because I don't think just anyone could step in and animate this, even if they had a lot of talent. It's very yeah,
Well,
there's a
I
tone
mean,
to it.
yeah, I guess they technically could. It's just the process that I chose is, I think, something that fewer people would
Mm-hmm.
really be able to, and be like actually sit down and attempt this epic years-long
Yeah.
of. I'm just gonna take a break.
Experimentation.
Yeah, I mean, it requires a level of sanity that we lack.
We'll call it creativity, artistic
Right.
ambition.
I mean, it was like method acting for an stunt man or something like that.
That's cool.
Well, that's the thing. Like, John actually doesn't draw from video. He doesn't like freeze frame a video of someone dancing and try to create. He actually just watches it until he himself can kind of create that move in his brain. Then he starts doing it.
And I fantasize myself
performing it perfectly on stage. Yes.
But yeah, like definitely, I don't practice as much as I used to, but I'll go and definitely, I think it's at the practices, practices are different than battles or practices or ciphers. It's a very much more communal, and you can ask people for help and questions and like, how do you do that move? So they'll show you, but if you step to them on a battle, they're gonna roast you with like that move. You know what I mean? But,
again, another reason why I like the game more than the real thing. Have your friends
multiplayer? Have you played multiplayer with anyone?
I haven't. I was gonna say that'll be the next level of bravery for me.
Watch out for those burns.
I was gonna say, I do like the fact that the game lets you be a little cheeky in multiplayer. Like, I've seen other people play it, so it's not this isn't like a lovey-dovey everybody wins kind of game. Let's be clear, there is absolutely competitive edge, but it's fun and it's kind of like taunting in the way that like a battle is taunting too. Have your friends who dance, or have they played the game? Like, have people been receptive to this? Like, do people think it feels right? And like, obviously people think it's fun, but in terms of like the dance experience, do people think it hits the mark?
Yeah, I mean, I guess because a Switch is hard to get. It's
yeah, I don't have one yet, so I'm living vicariously.
So definitely, like, people I know, like people, my friends, close friends, and show them, and they'll just lose it. Like they're just losing it.
That's great.
What happens? It's yeah. So
what a great feeling.
I haven't. I think throughout this process, I was very, very protective of culture stuff and how things are, and realistically, even though the characters are so cute and squishy and round and like they're still very I don't know, they move very realistically or they try to, and so I think that combination, I was just very, very, and Eric too, we were very conscientious of how this is gonna be accepted, and I think for the most part it's been very positive, and I think that a lot of it's not so much on them like checking the details, but it's more like, whoa, this thing's on Nintendo and it's about our life. Oh
yeah, man. Part of me reflected in a game for real.
So they're just happy, I think, and there's a lot of people that are actually they've got kids and they're able to pass it on intergenerationally, and the kid excited, and then I see just kids play it and then they start dancing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You're inspiring a new generation.
We've seen a lot of videos of people playing. The kids are actually trying to.
Oh, cute.
Step or whatever.
So like
that's one, like
biggest.
great. I mean,
like it's that's when we know we like really, really did something like that we're proud of because we can like actually pass it on for real, or
Mm-hmm.
people excited when they weren't already excited. And
That's cool.
so we definitely got good and some great reviews from the gaming community, which is very important. And then from hip hop and boing and breaking,
Mm-hmm.
the table stuff. Even like when Eric's talking about the chorus sections.
Yeah.
So we did that to make it look like those old music sequencers, that the squares and the X's.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like.
And so that
Cool.
Programming 808 or something like that. It's very, fundamental to.
So yeah, that's the opportunity to be Kid Koala for those two like tough sections in the game where you just gotta hit those rhythms to the like. And I remember Eric in the studio like laughing, like doing these impossible rhythms and like, oh, nobody's gonna get this one. So
that's
Then they do learn them. I mean, we're talking about the more the later in the game, the boss level ones where we just kind of went ridiculous.
Well, Roger, one of our coders, he's a baller. Like, you could just hit him one time, like one shot, fine crown.
Oh, cool.
What?
So some people can just get it, I guess.
That's well, I think if you're like a true rhythm gamer, that's like where your rep is.
That's
like,
your jam right there. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, like you hear the music once and it's kind of,
It's like printed in your brain. Yeah, totally.
Audiograph.
Well, that speaks to the music, right? It has to have a catchy beat for people to care enough to want to master it too, right?
Well, I mean, that really comes from like DJing at break events, and essentially you would take two copies of the record and you just run the break, just the drum section, because that was, for the most part, like the most exciting part of the record. That's pretty much what started the music scene. And so, but even with that, I remember when we were trying to figure out how long the rounds should be, it was like that. I'm like, from just personal experiences, like, okay, well, usually they'll jump in the cipher and they will, arc their segment in a certain amount of time, and at one point they're just gonna tap out. It's just humanly possible to further that. So at that point, realize, okay, well, let's have a chorus section there, where everyone kind of claps along, or everyone
that's cool.
Rock or something like that at one point, and then so the verses were still like your solo moments, and then the choruses were the communal, like.
Oh, that's really clever.
And I, even from playing in bands and stuff, I remember when it was moments like that where we had a few shots that everybody had to hit, the drummer, the bassist, and turns out, like, just to be in sync in that moment, you got a little dopamine hit.
I was just gonna say, yeah, absolutely.
So those, I mean, yeah, a whole night of concerts of just shots with nothing else would be something else. At one point you got to get back to the groove, but it does sort of add some dynamic there, and I think that's I mean, we're just getting started. I mean, we've been talking about even how to further enhance the different sections in the game with what we've started, but I mean, I think right now, I mean, we're pretty excited that it's out there and people are taking a chance on the game and having fun, and we're getting a lot of that back, where again, it's like kids and their parents or their grandparents, and they're all just kind of rocking out, and
that's cool.
I you couldn't really ask for anything more.
That's awesome. And I know you guys have some plans to already spin this off. Like, you have a double record vinyl that you're going to release that goes along with Floor Kids, so that'll have some of the music.
Yes.
And we talked very briefly. I don't think you've released all the modes for the game. You've sort of got some other elements that you're cooking up. Perhaps not for Switch, but for future versions. Is that right?
I'm sorry?
Perhaps not for the Switch version, but for future versions. Is that right?
Oh, I mean, just in general, as we get, I think it will be, across all platforms, as well as like porting it to other platforms. That's part of the plan for the.
Nice.
Yeah, it's gonna depend on the development time for each one, but I think a new mode could appear on the Switch first, and then as we
Exciting.
go
Yeah, I mean,
we got a lot of feedback saying people want practice mode, which was something
we always had.
Yeah, because it's one of those things with combos. It's kind of like sometimes you really have to like get on it.
Yeah.
Fall off your bike, you get back on it
for a few times, yeah.
And just focus on that. So that's something I think that's coming down the pipeline pretty quickly.
Nice.
I know regarding actual expansion of the game, there's going to be new venues, new music. We have some guest MCs coming to future who will remain nameless for now, but I'm very excited to be
very
working
cool.
on them. So there's that, and then just continuing to play around with this engine that has been built and see how we can push it even further for more fun factor.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, it does require this dude to draw.
I was gonna say I won't expect too much given you're a small team in terms of time frames, but you guys have come, I think, pretty far with this, and you've got a really polished game, so it's exciting to know that you're still sort of working on it. It's not been put aside. I will humbly suggest taking some kind of live tour on the road, competitive live battles with music. That would be great.
Oh, that would be fun. Like
so cool.
Like tournament.
Esports style. Yeah, exactly. Like round robins on stage with like live DJ.
Where would you do that? Where could we do that? Is that something that people would go? Does it have to be at a venue, or can it be like at the YMCA? I mean, how does this work? Like,
that's a good question. I'll get back to you with logistics. But there's a lot of what they're calling esports venues around Canada now, and I think that they've been limited to some degree in the games that they can offer. So there are a lot of these like sort of violent, competitive multiplayer games, whereas games like I'm a big fan of Rocket League, which is just soccer with rocket cars, not terribly violent, and games like Floor Kids, which are very sort of group and I guess live event oriented already. Like it's kind of like exciting to be at a sporting event or exciting to be at like a b-boy battle. The video game component's just sort of a cool tie-in. Anyways, I don't think I need to add more to your plate, but
we need to talk further about that. We do actually have a tour booked,
nice.
But this is going to be, it's more like a tour, like launch parties for the game.
Nice. Very cool.
Starting in April, we have 18 cities in North America, and then we're heading to Europe in the fall, I believe.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
that's a great way to get this out there.
We're bringing our consoles. We're bringing the arcade consoles so that people can play around with the game before the show starts, and then we're going to integrate some of the music into the show also.
Very cool.
But what you're talking about is actually
we also got
a different type of event, which I think is awesome. Also, so
potential. It has potential.
Yeah. No. It's really great. We can have, bleachers set up like it's.
Yeah, maybe like fan sections where people can dance. Like when like people play DDR, they have like a crew behind them that kind of dances too.
Right.
I spent a lot of time in Japanese arcades, but yeah, we need more of that here. John, what were you just holding up? Sorry, I missed that. Was that the?
Talking about different merch. These are like little enamel pins.
Oh, cute. Yeah, the artwork is like so adorable. I don't think I really need to say that. I didn't even mention it yet, but everyone can see it just by taking a look. I mean, it's just, they're cute. The kids are really cute drawn. I feel like if you're a fan of b-boy style art, you're just going to fall in love with it. Like it just kind of fits the culture really well. So you guys have done a great job representing.
And I was over just real quick. I was over at Eric's house last night. We were working on some artwork for the vinyl and also brainstorming for shirts and other kinds of stuff that would probably be ready for the tour. And so it's a lot. We're moving on all these different tracks at the same time.
Exciting. Well, we at the GameDev Cafe will follow up and make sure that we find out all of these dates and events and all this exciting news. while I have you, and I do appreciate you spending so much time with me today, but I do have one last question, and it's sort of more about you guys personally. But I ask this of pretty much everyone I interview. I am curious if there's any one video game, and given that you guys aren't strictly game dev, it could also be maybe a movie or a piece of art or anything. But is there one sort of media from your youth that you feel emotionally inspired you as an artist? And video game is kind of an easy one because a lot of people have that one nostalgic game. But like I said, if you have like a movie or even like sort of a role model or someone in the industry, anyone who sort of inspired you to do what you do. Tough question.
If we just go on a game, since we're on the Game Dev Cafe, I always talk about Star Fox.
Oh, nice.
And for a couple reasons, I think I really appreciated the low poly, the low res aesthetic that they embraced and made look really, really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a detriment that it would, pixels and it's simple shapes. And I think that even though it's a totally different game, and it's like I'm not into shooting games that much, but it kind of had this thing where it's like there's these animals, the pilot, and they blow up these droid things. It's kind of felt like a cute animal Star Warsy kind of thing, but it's like low pixel resolution, and then you're flying depth, like you're going into the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I remember it being easy enough for me to pick up, and then it would get challenging, and then I would just keep getting better at it. And I just remember it was also cool because you'd have these little pilot friends, these buddies that you'd have to save. This guy, no. I think that was like, I have memories of that, and so I think that game I played on Super Nintendo and N64. I liked it.
Nice. You ever played on Virtual Boy? That like scary. Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah. I guess after that, I kind of like.
It wasn't worth it.
I understood afterwards that I'm not good at video games, and I should find something I'm good at. But
Gotcha.
But I think that is a fun nostalgia. That's what I would say is nostalgic. I don't know if it affected me into becoming, an artist or getting into games, but it's just something that I definitely remember.
Nice. Very cool.
Like, not turn down an opportunity to play it again.
How about you, Eric? Any games stand out?
Okay. For games, I would say Castlevania.
Nice.
The first one on an NES, which I spent a lot of my childhood at my friend Kingsley's house, and the cool kids trying to beat that game. Never finished it. So, there's a bucket list item there. But yeah, huge formative years. Love the music, love the adventure of it. For film, I would say Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, or Dead Alive, as it's known in some countries.
In other countries,
With
yes.
The film, when I saw that film, I just didn't realize that film could do that, and I think it kind of opened and closed a genre in one film. It was just like. And then there was that movie that he didn't bother to try to repeat because it was just one of those,
he was at the top of his
Starland. Oh, it was
indie
crazy.
Horror game. You don't get much better than that. Many people
just draw on the ground. Being like, what is this film? And so I've studied that a lot. And it continues to, reveal like levels of jokes and stuff that's crazy. And then I think in music, I would say probably, Thelonious Monk.
Nice.
He's probably, gentleman who's playing an instrument that's been around for centuries and is still able to just completely reinvent it, He's doing it. And I love his work. I just love that you can listen to even 2 bars of it and know it's him. You know what I mean? Just such a singular style there. Yeah.
Such a unique approach. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
examples. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time today. It was really cool to get to know a little bit about you and I guess obviously how Floor Kids came to be, but also I think how you guys came to be, how you came to
Yeah.
make games and how this sort of crazy project came about, given that, your specialties are music, art. I mean, these are all facets of the same thing. And I talk to game developers all the time about how, when it comes to creativity, there's no one label or one box that anybody fits into. But I think for our audience, it's really awesome to hear from people who didn't start out in a traditional game development career focus, but have still made a game that, as you say, is not only getting, sort of good community reception, but a lot of attention from the games industry. It's really done something unique. So congratulations, you guys. And again, thanks so much for taking the time
Of
today.
course. It's our pleasure. And I will say, onto that level, it was almost like some of the kids that had responded to that first cold call into the ether there.
Yeah.
They were either some of them had been listening to my music before, or seen me in shows before, or obviously following me on some channels, so they even got the call. But I remember first meeting them and realizing that, the scenes themselves, including animation, including game development and code kids and stuff, is that there's never really been like an event where everybody can meet.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But once you do meet people, you realize it's like, oh, they're kind of our kin, but just in this thing,
just
you
different.
know what I mean? But
yeah.
I remember where they were saying things like, oh, we would have never even thought of approaching you to do music for something, possibly for even another project, because we just figured you're so deep in your music thing. Same thing with the animation. Those kids don't leave their drawing.
It's siloed. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, when you actually do meet, like you said, kind of creatives, that there's a link there, and I think I would say that to the people out there, especially people developing games, that you shouldn't be scared to just reach out and just, like, who knows, like, maybe call your favorite band, or call you never know, depending on what they're into. They might be into games themselves and just never realize that it was a possibility to collaborate on something. So
totally,
I think that's it. I mean, you're dealing with three cultures that are quite shy by nature: animators, DJs, coders.
It's a mishmash, and like you said, don't be afraid.
You're talking about people that don't mind spending a lot of time alone. So it's like the social aspect of it is one of those things where when we actually met and got a room, started jamming on ideas, we're like, oh, this is cool. Took something pretty dope.
No, that's really good advice for others, I think, is not being afraid to reach out and understanding that, like you said, like, people are looking for opportunities to work and make awesome things together. And if that's sort of your intent, then you'll probably find some like minds.
If you're learning stuff and you take what you know and you apply it to a new project, not only does it kind of push you to, like, further, learn what you're about or what you can do or contribute, but it does offer you these new opportunities to test your skills. You know what I mean? Like, so for me, even was like sound design, that was never a thing. I've never been asked to do that. And then while we're working on a game, realizing, hey, wait a minute, it'll be way more fun if a sound happened at that moment also, when you hit this button or something. And then that became like a whole thing that I got really obsessed about for several.
Don't sleep on the sound effects. Don't sleep on the sound effects. They are so good. They're so addictive.
But it's
when we were in the studio hearing the sound effects for the first time, a lot of the code guys at Hall House were like, "What's that game?"
Oh, cool.
Yes, well, what?
That's the funny thing, is I had like a collection of all these really weird, esoteric, like, vintage, strange music gadgets and stuff, and yeah, I don't think Floor Kids by any means was able to amortize like the money. But all of a sudden I'm like, hey, you need that kind of sound? I've got the perfect combination of boxes I can wire together to make this down for that very moment. And so it was fun. It was just like an opportunity that, I don't get from other types of projects, So
That's
cool.
cool. Yeah, and that kind of musical alchemy works in video games really well because, as you said, it's all about designing that experience. The effects, yeah, really make a difference. I guess, John, on that same note, is there any advice that you might have for folks who are similarly looking to collaborate on either a game project or an animation project? Like, do you advise just reaching out into the ether?
Mine is probably more. I think it's identifying projects that you can have a personal meaning or stake in it, like
Nice.
you really care about it, because, well, the nature of animation and working on animation is pretty much you almost have to commit your entire amount of time, and then even beyond that, it goes into other regions of time that you gotta. So, there's generally only so many you can work on at one time, but and so the ones that you'll work on are the ones that you really really care about, and the ones to attract others to that project, they also have to care about it a lot. So I think that's what Eric had in common, and then Phil Rostang had shot footage of b-boy communities, and when he was touring, he really collabed and looked into how b-boy events are judged and scored, and so that actually made its way into the game. And then with HoloLabs, Mike, and it's like it was something very challenging that they loved, the challenge in solving problems. So anyways, it's something that if you can find it's about figuring out if that person, if you guys have chemistry. And also, like, I'll say Jody, who was also one of the game designers for our controls. She was a B-girl, like,
oh, cool,
be in the scene way more than me, and so, like, a lot of that, everyone had something that they could have a vision for in the project, and I would say be on the lookout for those people, so that it's, obviously we all want to succeed in the traditional sense, but at the end of the day, I think we all want to be proud of what we made, and then build it from there. And once you're proud of something, you can get it out there. And so that's for sure. Like, reaching out is part of that process. And then also, the people that you've worked with, that you've seen how they work, you see how they finish things, you see if they don't finish things. Those are things that you're just gonna know about a person after kind of like having maybe worked with them, or so that's a little bit of it too, like the
totally
interpersonal chemistry.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. Chemistry for the project and for the team. This has been really insightful, guys. Thank you again so much. As I said before, we'll follow up and make sure that we find out all about this sort of launch tour that you guys are doing, any events where people can come and see you. I know there's a few games conferences that you might be at as well. But in the meantime, if anyone is joining us midway through this interview, you will be able to watch the whole thing up at twitch.tv/GameDevCafe for a short time, and then of course you can find it at GameDevCafe.com. Eric and John, thanks again for joining me today. HoloLabs team, we're going to try to get to them eventually because there's a few more people involved in this project that we didn't talk to today. But if you would like to learn more, please go to floorkids.com. And in the meantime, thanks very much for joining us on Game Dev Cafe. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, guys.
Later.
Thank you.
Cheers.